Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Falls Township Board of Supervisors meeting for September 4th, 2012. We'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. If everybody could rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Pullen?
Mr. Galloway?
Here.
Mr. Snipes?
Here.
Mr. Harvey?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Rocco?
Here.
Okay, thank you, everybody coming out. We have a very straightforward and we hope a kind of productive agenda, but we're going to start off with a very special awards ceremony honoring some of our own. If Fire Marshal and recent Grandpop Rich DiPolito could come to the microphone, please. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Although you really didn't do anything, but yeah.
Well, over the last 20-some years. Good evening, and I just wanted to give a brief synopsis of what this was all about. I was recently approached about an idea to create an awards and accommodations program to honor both the township fire departments and the rescue squads. This is something that's been done in law enforcement, but until now had not formally been done for fire or EMS. It was an idea that was presented that I personally believe is long overdue. Back in April, we had just this type of event to be recognized. The idea was for any chief, deputy chief, or the fire marshal is able to nominate a person or group for an act that they deem worthy. In this case, the squad chief has nominated all involved, so at this time I'll turn it over to Chief Reef from the Levittown Feral Souls Rescue Squad.
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Christopher Reef. I'm the chief of the Levittown Fearless Hills Rescue Squad. We provide the 911 paramedic service for Falls Township. On April 9th, our services were requested with those of the Fearless Hills Fire Department. August 9th was a beautiful day, a little bit of golfing, and Mr. Hosbach, if you'd like to come up, will you be able to come up? Mr. Hosbach was golfing at the Oxford Valley Golf Course when he suddenly went into cardiac arrest. 92% of those who go into cardiac arrest out of the hospital do not survive.
Oh, thank you.
There's a great history in the book from RA Health.
Okay.
Fortunately, right people at the right place at the right time fell into place. In the industry, it's called the chain of survival, and this is required for anyone to survive an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And we had civilians who performed CPR, called 911. Paramedics quickly responded. The fire marshal's office happened to be right around the corner. Fire marshal happened to be right around the corner, responded as well. And the men from the Fearless Hills Fire Department responded. You can see the great, I mean, just simply look at this room, what it takes to impact and save one life. And Mr. Hosbach is one of the 8% in the country that is able to stand up today and tell you and testify about the successes of that. So without further ado, I'd like to show some accommodations to the civilians that helped that day. Mr. Peter Horsley. I'm going to call 3 up. Mr. Ken Morgan. Right up there. You need a hand? That's okay. And Mr. Joe Myers. Before I hand out these awards, I just want to kind of express the courage it takes. Honestly, the firefighters and the paramedics, we train every day on a regular basis how to respond to an emergency. When a civilian has the courage to step up and put themselves in a situation that they're not comfortable with, like these gentlemen here did, this is the outcome, is the survival of a gentleman who gets to see a wonderful 20, 30, 40 years of his life, play some more golf at least. So Mr. Morgan, right? Oh, wrong one. I knew I was going to get that wrong. And Mr. Myers. These two gentlemen were instrumental in activating 911 and in performing CPR. Something special for Mr. Horsley. Mr. Horsley is the first one to initiate CPR, and to his story, when I was getting his story, he told me he hadn't taken a CPR class in 10 years. The fact remains, CPR has changed here and there, but he understood just to start chest compression, start. So the American Heart Association actually is identifying him as a Heart Saver hero and is presenting him with an award. I'm presenting on their behalf from the American Heart Association, a national award given to civilians to have the courage to step up and start CPR. Can I have Dr. Emmerich? Is Dr. Emmerich in the audience as well? If you can come up, please. Mr. Horsley is also receiving the Civilian Hero Award. At Levittown, we're identifying the civilians that, again, show the courage that we'd expect from one of our own in uniform. Mr. Horsley was able to do it and then finish another 9 holes of golf, so that's pretty impressive. And before I bring up before the firefighters and the paramedics come up, the chain of survival not ends, but it is really kind of facilitated a little bit further by the emergency department physician. I can't say enough how much we appreciate Aria Bucks and the emergency, chaired by Dr. Harry Emmerich here. Dr. Emmerich has taken an ownership in educating and training paramedics, ongoing, continuing education, and helping with our successes in the field. He happened to be the physician on call that day, and Dr. Emmerich, you're receiving the Healthcare Hero Award for
Great,
today.
thank you so much.
Thanks, fellas. Thank you. Thanks. All right, fellas. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you.
Hey, if I can have Chief DiPolito? I will, sir. Thank you. So, quite often, paramedics and firefighters, we work very closely together, and on April 9th, we did the same. Chief DiPolito's company, the Fairless Hills Fire Company, they're second to none when it comes to responding to medical emergencies by our side. And the men came and assisted. If the paramedics from the day can come up, paramedic Steve Hare, Ben Calhoun, Brian Huber. And today, Hank Degner, the 4th paramedic on the call, he's very ill, actually placed on hospice recently. His wife and his daughters are here to accept on his behalf. So I'm going to call up the Degner family, please. Yep.
If I could also have Battalion Chief Ken Dalbert, firefighter Jim McCole, firefighter Chris Velasco, Eric Lawrence, Scott Rhodes, as well as past Chief and Fire Marshal Rich DiPolito, Fire Police Officers Jack Murphy and Steve Dahl. Please come forward.
I'm really speaking to the civilians or to the citizens of Falls Township. This is what it takes to save a life. The civilians, the firefighters, the paramedics, the physicians, the nurses. It's a team approach, and it starts with early CPR and calling 911 quickly. It's so important to do that to get the help there. And this is the team that helped Mr. Hosbach return to recovery. So we're going to present them with the life-saving pin. This is now a merit award for all firefighters, paramedics, EMTs in the township, identifying that they've actually saved a life that's become, that's returned to a quality of life.
So just start, I'll follow, and I'll complete when you're done.
Hey, fellas, how you doing? This brotherly love here, right? Well done, Chief. Mr. Harvey, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much, and everybody. I think everybody obviously wants to thank these people for all the work they've done.
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you very much. And we've talked, thank you, we've talked before many times about community and about, you know, it's more than just the people up here, it's more than just the people that work in this building. And you're seeing great examples here, not even just our trained first responders, but also people from the community themselves who just step forward, whether they're doctors or they're just out playing golf and they see something wrong, but they act. And that's really what makes Falls Township a great community. So thank everybody who was involved in this, and especially thank the gentleman who organized the ceremony tonight. So, you know, obviously a lot of commendations out to you too. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
That's fine. And our first agenda item is going to be a public comment. We have some of our honorees who are leaving now, so we'll wait for a little bit. Mr. Gray will get the list of people who are interested in commenting.
I think Pete Gray and Marky were the only two guys who didn't have to save this guy. Pete believes in the one giant chest compression. He just got a dives on it. You break like 6 ribs, but you start breathing immediately.
Okay, the only name I have on my list, Mr. Roland Kinney.
Roland County Falls Township. Last meeting, I want to thank you, Mr. Obert, for bringing up having something back there where we can tell what you're going to speak about tonight. Perfect case was last meeting. You went into a session, and it took too long, and I left. I didn't know you were going to bring up the building and the island when you came out. If that was on the agenda, I would have stayed because I had something to say about it. Been talked to a lot of people in our township, and they look at what they see as 13 to 17 million or whatever for this building. And all the things I hear, too much money. They think you can do it cheaper. So just keep that in mind. And Viles Island, we got that for $1 or $2 from Waste Management. Did they pay any taxes on that when they owned it?
They still pay taxes on it. Yeah, they still pay. We don't own it yet, so they still pay taxes on it.
So when we get it, we're taking the tax burden off them too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what taxes they pay. It's obviously, yeah, it's just like it's a mining area, so.
Whatever it is, we're.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, but people are dead against that. They think it's a waste of money. They got a park, they got skate park, they got dog park. They got even a place where we can put Mr. Dent's.
Which park is that?
Yeah.
You golf, Mr. Kenny?
Huh?
You golf?
No. I bowl, but I haven't bowled in 10 years either since I broke my back, so. Oh, you're anxious to hit me with.
No.
So all in all, enjoy your night. It's a good meeting. Firefighters got and rescue got the initiative that they should have got.
Yeah.
Thank you. God bless you. Good night.
Thank you. And just to, I guess, to follow up on Mr. Kinney's comments, the issue of Viles and the building was brought up by me during board comment, and we don't typically know who's going to say what during board comment. It was just more or less just to kind of let board members know my thoughts about bringing it up at this meeting, which we are going to do. So we didn't really make any decisions officially yet. We're going to do that, in some cases, do that tonight. So you really haven't missed much.
Yeah, but do you see my point, what Mr. Rocco said? He said
I agree.
if something was back there, it might have, tuned in on my mind. My mind's slow. Every year it gets slower and slower. Just like I backed everybody up there. The only one I didn't back was Mr. Dent's because I didn't know him till I met him. Then I fell in love with the kid.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Thank you. That's the only name I had on my list. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Public comment? No? Okay. All right, move on with our agenda. Item 2 is a presentation on proposed building renovations by Kimmel Bogret. I see Martin Kimmel is here, who has been here before. We've had presentations from Mr. Kimmel before, so I think board members are pretty familiar with the, I guess, 4.5 options that are available regarding this building. And the original award we gave to Kimmel Bogret into looking into this building covers so far, I think it was about $25,000, I think something like that, or was it, no, what was I forget now? But it was, covered the original work on this building, the work that they've done so far, coming up with the proposals, et cetera. But it also covers the next step, which would be for the board to direct the firm to start doing in-depth study on one of those plans. And so I think that's a move we would like to make tonight, and also discuss a little bit about how we move forward in terms of bringing that budget down. I mean, what Mr. Kinney said is correct. All of us agree up here that, the prices that we were looking at are higher than we wanted to spend, and so we want to look at some ways to bring those down. I guess my understanding from the board, and I'll ask for input at this time, is I think the majority of the board, if not the entire board, is favorable toward, I guess it was option 4A, the option that opened up.
The one he recommended.
Yeah, the cul-de-sac, the one recommended by Kimmel Bogret. Is that the board's? Is that my understanding right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
It might be helpful just to do a little more explaining of what that option entails. Maybe that's what you're going to
Sure.
help
Yeah,
us.
If you don't mind, just kind of explaining as briefly. We've done some of it already. But
Okay,
what's-
yeah, I'll be thin on presentation as compared to my prior visits. And I also want to commend you all for that ceremony that I was fortunate enough to witness tonight. That was really fantastic. I think that EMTs in particular a lot of times don't get the credit that they're due for the fantastic work they do, so it was a real pleasure for me to happen to just be lucky enough to witness that, so I think that was just great. Question explained, we presented 4, and as the supervisor pointed out, 4.5 options. Option 4A, which is the one we recommended the last time I was here, is to leave this building facility primarily intact and to build behind and to, I guess, the left of it as you'd face it from the highway, a new facility, and then at the same time to also connect to the cul-de-sac that's, I guess that would be north end of the property. Currently, the township owns a good bit of property back there that you don't really have beneficial use of. It would also, interestingly enough, give you some good emergency ingress and egress out of the site that you don't currently have as well. And then to, once the new facilities are built, to then tear down the facility that we're in right now. And the heart substance of the recommendation really came from the fact that the cost to renovate this would be equal to or greater than the cost to build new, and so the better investment would tend to be to have all new.
Okay. A question just while we're discussing here, and a little bit not off topic, but obviously it's on the same topic. A couple of comments I have heard from people that live directly behind the building with regards to stormwater management. That their contention is that when this building was built, obviously many years ago, and other developments were done, the one across the street, for example, the stormwater issue for people that live behind us here has gotten worse. My understanding is that when this building was built, there really was nothing done with stormwater management. And so my belief is, from discussions, I guess, with different people, is that any renovations we make would improve or should improve the stormwater management issue. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. On this current site, there are no stormwater management provisions at all, except for those that were installed when you redid or built a new salt shed, which was how many years ago?
16.
Oh, was it that long ago? Okay. At any rate, a small stormwater basin was built as part of that construction, but otherwise the overwhelming amount of paving that you have on this site is sort of unmanaged completely. Part of the design calls for actually a reduction in the total amount of impervious paved surface that you would have to begin with, and then also we would bring the site into full sort of state-of-the-art best practice compliance, and I would expect that we would substantially improve the conditions over what they currently are.
Okay. Yeah, I know that'll be welcome news to some of the people that live
Yeah.
behind us. So, all right, so I guess it's the direction of this board. I guess we can direct you now. I don't think we necessarily have to have a vote on it. To explore further, take the next step with option 4A. Now, what would that entail? What exactly would you be doing?
Okay. The balance of our first phase of our contract is to then take the now selected option that you have and to develop sufficient detail in floor plans that the departments would be able to understand the operational characteristics and adjacencies of individual spaces, so you'd see all the individual rooms, whereas right now we just had big block diagrams by department. We would also, during that process, develop a priority list, so that if, for whatever reason, when you get to the kind of the next phase of the decision on spending, that the total amount of the need that was documented currently can't be met with the amount of funds that you're willing to dedicate, we would prioritize things so that it would be easy to say, okay, we'll have less of this or none of that, to be able to right size it to match the need in the budget as best we can. So we're very mindful of the comment that was made here. The original first phase was to do sort of everything that was possibly needed to kind of look out 25 years as far as we can look. And then we can, part of the process is to then right size it so that then you approve the next step, hopefully. It's a match between need and budget. So we'll do that as well. In addition, we will create an accurate and pretty detailed site plan that would allow you to understand the whole parking characteristics and traffic flow, things like that. And then we would also develop some exterior images so you could see what the various components would look like. And then last but not least, we would update the cost estimate with more detail and with priorities and options kind of laid out so that you'd be able to kind of track different pieces of the project as you might move forward.
Okay. Mr. Clark, we're not actually spending any money here. Obviously, the original proposal that we've awarded covers this next step. Is it your belief that we need to have a vote to sort of direct him to move on?
No, I think you've retained Kimmel Bogrett as your consultant on this, and you are simply giving them direction this evening. This direction could have been given in a private meeting, but I know that it's the board's desire to have this process be transparent and for the public to see what's happening. But there's no need for a vote. You're just giving him direction, and I'm assuming, unless there's a lot of dissent, that the five of you are in agreement with the direction that you're giving.
Yeah.
As you move further on down the road, and you're spending money, or there may be additional costs, then that would require votes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Mr. Kimmel, you and I had a discussion in thinking about how best to move forward, and you had brought up the idea of possibly making a subcommittee. How would that work? So have you worked on that in the past with other communities or other projects?
Yeah, it's a classic challenge because you do seek transparency in the whole process, and we want to help you deliver that in a way that's good for everybody at all the various tables here. It also, though, on the other hand, you need to have input, and it's good for us as the consultant to have the input of the board at the same time we have the input of the staff, so that, again, we can right size it and make sure everybody kind of sees everything, even transparency within the group. Obviously, you have then the sunshine provisions, I think they're referred to as, which doesn't allow you to all gather without it being a public meeting, and that's not a convenient way to go through building kind of details, because it's very time consuming and you'd have to hold a lot of them. So what most folks do and what we recommend is if you form a building committee or a study committee, or you could name it whatever you like, that has representation of the board along with representation of the staff, and the board's comfortable that those people could come back at a public meeting and advise the full board of the things that were discussed and the ideas, and of course I can always supplement that with detail and come as you would need me to. That's a great efficient way to keep the ball moving and not have it get bogged down. So I would highly recommend that you would, amongst yourselves, decide who wants to be involved in the intimate detail, recognizing that there'll be full disclosure of the full detail whenever you all want it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, of course, state law, you mentioned the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law prevents any three of us from meeting to discuss or deliberate or take action. And so my thoughts would be, if there are two board members who would like to sit on the subcommittee, and it, could also obviously include, as Mr. Kimmel talked about, representatives of the major departments, Mr. Gray, and that way, we're getting, board input, especially in particular looking at the issue of cost and how we can sort of contain the costs and taking a look at the priorities. So I guess, if we, I don't know if there's people that want to volunteer now, or we can discuss it going forward, but I think having a subcommittee is a good idea. Is that something that other people think would be a good idea as well?
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Listen to Mr. Kimmel's tonight, though. It sounds like once he develops his plan, he'll have itemized a list of, who's getting what. Mm-hmm. Maybe at that point we can form a committee when we're actually going to start deciding who needs what, or what we can afford, or
Okay.
what we want to spend. We can do it now, but, I mean, is that something we want to look at now before you get started?
I would advise that the committee be formed shortly after this meeting, and that the next steps we take forward are with the committee's
Okay.
input.
Well,
Because
there you
that's
go.
how, we'll use that to do the right thing.
Right.
And come back.
Yeah, because I wouldn't necessarily want them coming up with a plan for certain size
Right.
space for an office, only for us to tell them, no, we want it smaller. So, okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so I guess we'll, I guess we'll have to volunteer right this second, but we'll certainly, we'll have some discussions, and we'll have two of our members volunteer who want to take part in this
Draw
committee.
straws.
Okay, draw straws. Okay. Comments or questions for Mr. Kimmel before we let him go, and he's going to rush right back and start working right away on it.
Yeah, I was curious on the time frame for this next phase.
Oh, that's great. Perfect timing on that one, because I was going to offer that if no one asked. I would like to be able to have this phase wrapped up before the holiday season. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. There's plenty of time, actually. I would say that it would take place over probably 2 meeting cycles. Again, assuming that staff's available and so on. But that's how I would direct or recommend that we go forward, and be able to come back with a recommendation to the full board before, say, the break sometime. We could, in other communities have had it in the interim time, have a regular agenda item that's just an update for the full board and for the public at each meeting if you wanted to do that, or if there was enough detail to have anything to update. I mean, the update could be, we met and we haven't made any decisions, or it could be, this is what we found. And that's just kind of a great way to keep everybody in the loop and not have a surprise at the end, but I don't expect that.
Okay.
And what's the time commitment you need from the office workers or the management here?
We are really, we got so much great input from them, so we have all the data we need. So at this point, the things that we would want your direction on first would just be any issues of right sizing, or where you see that you might want to look at managing the scope of the project. Then we would be, from a detail perspective, we would be creating the work product that would be the floor plans and all the things that I mentioned a few minutes ago, and just present that to the staff and to the committee, who would then be able to react to it, in real time while we're there. And usually we'll have a few days go by where people can digest it and come back with their comments. That is not very time consuming. So we're talking about maybe 4 meetings over the course of that period of time. Maybe a little bit of out of meeting time where you might task a particular department to say, hey, you know what, we think we need to cut 5%. Go look at your little piece and tell us what you think you could live without if you had to, or something like that. And I'm just, this is a hypothetical, is how you might do it. So it's not a major commitment in terms of number of hours. You might be talking about 6 to 10 hours of, for an individual who's involved in the committee to participate, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? See one hand. Motion to open public comment.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Mr. Kinney?
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
First of all, this has nothing to do with it, but welcome back, Mr. Clark. Hope you're feeling well, young man. Next, our beloved chief. How is he? This has something to do with her. Chief, what I'm going to say.
Okay. The chief is doing okay, still suffering some side effects from I guess he had a serious concussion. I talked to him last week. So he wants to come back to work, obviously, but he's doing well.
Okay. Now, I was thinking a couple times riding by the old Pathmark building. The young man that owns the flower shop, I think, he's only using a quarter of that.
The other half has been it's being renovated. It's going to be occupied. I've talked several times.
I was going to say
Yeah.
3/4 of it ain't.
Right.
Move the police department up there. They can put the cars down the side. We pay that and everything. We don't mind having the police across the street from us.
It's too close to you.
They need it. All right, that's all I had to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the building? No? All right. Motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so no more comments or questions, Mr. Kimmel. Mr. Kimmel has his direction, and we'll get back to you on a subcommittee or a couple members here, and we appreciate your time and all the work you put in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3 is a presentation by ACT Engineers for Biles Island. We have, ACT has been working for the past year or so on Biles Island, and been put together a very comprehensive master plan. And what we're looking at today, back in the spring, I guess it was, or late winter, we approved some money to be spent for looking into the possibility of getting some grant money from the state. And we're at a point where we need to make some decisions about that money that's coming in and what the next step is. And so ACT is here just to give us sort of an update and also to give us some ideas of where we can go next. Want to let board members know, I did have a conversation with Mrs. Beskey from ACT and let her know that we certainly would be looking at this presentation tonight. We do not have to make a decision this evening. If we'd rather digest everything they're going to tell us, ask our questions, and then my hope would be that by the meeting in 2 weeks, we're ready to give them some direction. Obviously, if board members feel that they would like to give them direction tonight on some of this and wait on the rest, that's fine. If, we have a pretty, it's pretty open right now. So I see that ACT is putting together some audio visual for us here. So we'll give them a little bit of time to set this up. But Mrs. Beskey, if you want to give us a little bit of a rundown or add to anything I said?
I will, and thank you. Just for the board members that haven't met our team, because I think some of them have not, I'm Carol Beskey, President of ACT Engineers, and Rob Corkage is Vice President of ACT and a PE, and Eric Rosina, who's down on his knees now hoping that this will all work, is our environmental manager as well as the project manager for Biles Island. So yes, we've been involved with this for quite some time now, and it's a very exciting project. And the more we get out there in the public, contrary to maybe some beliefs, there's a lot of excitement about Biles Island, and there's a lot of real support out in at the state level and at the county level. So what we thought we would do tonight, because there's so very many moving parts to this, and what we were tasked with last was going out to find some funding sources. So that's going to be part of the presentation tonight. And we're going to try to pull together, all the various pieces as to where the funding sources are, what things need to happen to get those monies, if you so choose to, and just truly just see how you want to move forward with the Biles Island project. We know that one of the things that Falls would very much like to do, at least so has been expressed by many people, is to really get the northern end of the island opened and open to the public. So you're going to see tonight, how we can make all those things work, look at the numbers, etc. So we're going to kind of do a tag team here, and then what we're hoping to do after the presentation is really allow time for hopefully a lot of Q&A, because I think that there's just, as I said, a lot of moving parts, and we hope to make it clear. But and actually, as we go through the presentation, don't hesitate to stop and just stop and say, we don't understand that, or you're way off base, or that's not what we want to do, but that is what you want to do, or whatever. So we kind of like this to be an informal thing. And so Rob, would you like to come up and take it the next piece?
We're going to really talk about 3 things tonight specifically, but as Carol said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up about any aspects of the work that's been completed and some thoughts about where to go from here. Thank you. The 3 items. The first one, you've authorized us to take a look to submit a grant application to DCNR, which we have done, and that application is being reviewed by them. They have contacted us, and we've had pretty consistent conversation with them over the course of the last few months, and they continue to be very excited about Biles Island. Matter of fact, their words are that they love this project, and what they love about it is the way that the township's purpose is, as it's identified in the master plan that was generated for the island. One thing that we have learned, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about this, is that due to current reduced funding, the dollars will be at a lower level that they're able to make available at this point in time, but we'll tell you a little bit more about that. So that was item number one. There's two items here that we call, well, what are the next steps here? What could go along next? One is that there appear to be other funding sources besides DCNR, which are viable for this project. They're going to depend to some extent for some of these sources what the township's priorities are for how they would want to use available funding that's coming to them, and we'll tell you about that specifically. One thing that you've heard me say before is that when you use someone else's money, they get to tell you how they want your pot of gold to be used, and there's some strings attached to that. Some of what we have done in looking at these available funding sources has been to screen some of their rules and regulations to make sure that they're a reasonable fit for what we think the township's intentions are for Biles Island. But there's still work to do to really scrutinize what their details, because it is possible, and we've seen this happen before, where a funding source seems very attractive, but in fact, and they are, but in fact some of the rules that go along with it might compromise what the township's intent might be down the road, and we want to make sure we protect ourselves against that. Even though the funding may look attractive, it may not be a good match. So we wanted to talk with you a little bit more about that. Then the last part is that the Biles Island Master Plan talked about an initial presence, getting it opened to the public in an initial phase, or phase one of work. That's going to require some design work to be done in order to do that, and so we want to tell you a little bit about that as well. These last two next step items are subjects of scopes of work that we have identified for you with some budgets, and we're going to speak to those this evening as well. But our thought is that on these three subjects I've just described, that Eric's going to give you a little bit more detail and background about each of those. As Carol mentioned, we'd have some questions and answers, and then we'd come back and we can talk about the scopes of work that we suggest after that is done. And we don't tend to be here real long, and we've cut this down as short as we think we can. But if there's questions, we'll have to discuss those items.
And it all works.
Amazingly enough. Just as a quick refresher, the island of Biles Island is divided into multiple cells at this point in time, and for purposes tonight, I think the idea was to get out on the site in the northern end of the site, which focuses on this area here in the northern end, and separating it from the active area of mining, which would be the middle and southern end of the site initially. Key features of that include the pedestrian trails all the way around. There's a pedestrian bridge here with the reversing falls. We're showing a boardwalk area down in this area.
Time out.
Sorry.
Pull that back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I saw that and I started looking at the presentation and forgot I was going to ask.
Sorry.
Mr. Back up. I apologize.
Can you guys see back here? Okay. And I'll try and. So we've got, yeah, I can see everything. Improved access from an existing driveway alongside the Tyburn Road overpass to a split somewhere in this area to separate the traffic flow. So those are the main features of that. As Rob said, the next steps that we've identified into phase one was, and this was from before, was the acceptance of the master plan, which has been accomplished. The phase one design, which is part of why we're here tonight. Zoning review, currently the area is zoned farming and mining. Funding identification, which gets into the federal, state, county, and private funds that can be applied. To date, we've identified state funds. We've put in a grant application to DCNR. The total project value there was $390,000 for that project. As Carol stated, the feedback we're getting from DCNR from multiple sources is very positive. They do like the project, and there are multiple letters of recommendation that went along with that application, including one from Bucks County Planning, who also very much likes the project. Which leads me to some of the next funding, which is county funding. There are multiple sources of that: open space, natural areas, riverfront. All could be applied to this area in different aspects. And it's like Rob said, the
the rules and the contingencies that are in place may make sense in some areas and not in others. Phases 2, 3, and 4, again, these are things that are required for the future phases of the project as we move south on the island. Okay, what we've labeled this slide is potential funding scenarios. And what you'll see from this is this allocates, we've made very generalized estimates for the project. But what this shows is that we believe there's a potential funding scenario where 75% of the funding to design and construct phase 1 is outside funds. And 75% of it coming out from Bucks, actually more than that. It's actually 80%. Using Bucks County open space money, some of the natural areas money, and DCNR grant funding. The other required funding represents about 20% of the project value. Now this is where all the detail is that generates that kind of a chart. You've got this in your handouts. And what we've identified here is a DCNR grant funding and a combination of the open space funding and natural areas funding. They're underneath the Bucks County money, you'll see that does require ownership. So some of the values down here are italicized because I'm not totally sure they're in the whole island whether we can apply those funds for a whole project. But focusing on this line here represents your phase 1 design construction estimate as we see it today. Obviously, without the design in place, these are some gross estimates of construction value. We just don't know until we have hard designs done. But we estimated a $1 million construction cost, and this allocates $937,000 from Bucks County open space. That is just under the allocation that Bucks County does have for falls. So that would utilize the majority of that funding. This also allocates $54,000 of the $390,000 project towards the phase 1 preliminary design phase. What we've been led to believe at this point in time is that the level of funding that DCNR can allocate towards this project is roughly $90,000 to $100,000. So that's about where that stands at this point. Obviously, those numbers are not hard numbers until the awards are made, which is expected the third or fourth quarter of this year. So this utilizes $54,000 of that allocation to further the project. And for preliminary design, what you end up with is that money is basically all outside money for the design of and construction of design of the project. When you get to construction, this money has a 75% match. So there has to be a 25% outside source. What we've tried to do here is balance what monies can match different monies. You're not allowed to match county money with county money. It's one of the rules of the game, and so that's why you don't see that source of money being funded out of those funds. There are DCNR grants that allocate construction. We have applied for a planning grant from DCNR, so there could be additional monies. The likelihood of consecutive awards in consecutive years is unlikely from what we've been told. There may be a year or two span between the two. So if the project spaces out further, there could be other additional funding from DCNR. But as of this point in time, moving the project forward to be out there even as soon as next year would require us to use other funds. And that's what I have for you for presentation materials for slides tonight. I think we can entertain some questions.
Okay. All right. And supervisors also have a memo proposal, I guess you could say, from ACT that was delivered late last week. It was emailed to supervisor, to all the board members. Comments or questions either for Ms. Besky or Mr. Corcoran or Mr. Rosina regarding the proposals that they have in front of us here? Mr. Galloway?
I'm going to pass right now. If you can come back to me later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Snipes?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm glad to be thinking about moving forward on phase one. A couple of questions I have, and I'm trying to work my way through understanding the numbers. I'm sorry for that. As I'm looking at phase one, the total is $1,250,000.
That's correct.
Now that's based on a design that we have on this design, this sketch that we have in front of us.
That's correct. We put a construction estimate somewhere between 600 and 1.5 initially. So that number is right smack in the middle. Because of what's involved there, and some of the access issues, and some of what waste management may bring to the table, those estimates were a little on the broad side. As we get into things and work with them, some of those things can be hammered down a little bit and fine-tuned tighter. But for now, I've used the $1 million number, which is in the middle of there, for construction value.
So if for some reason the board is uncomfortable with that number, is there room to talk about changes to the plan that might bring
Absolutely.
the cost down?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was
Absolutely.
one question I had. The DCNR planning grant funding listed is there. Is that coming from the grant that we have applied for?
That's correct.
But we can only, looking at it, we can only spend $54,000 of that for this section?
Because
phase one?
that section, the DCNR grant has multiple components
Right.
for the overall project.
Correct.
The preliminary design component for phase one that can be allocated here is about $108,000 of that total project. It's a 50% match, thus you get a $54,000 allocation from DCNR from the grant money.
Okay, I may have other questions later, but.
Okay. Mr. Dents?
The Bucks County Open Space Funding, that's not money we've already been granted, correct?
That's the money. They're looking at the money that we've been given by the county to spend on open space.
That is the money then?
That is that money, yes.
And requiring ownership, we need to require ownership of phase one or the whole island?
We're working with that now. Our understanding is that the 187 that I have here and the 750 would be phase one, and that would be for a portion of the island that you would own.
Okay, so it would be ownership of phase one?
Yes, you would own phase one, or
All right,
have a
that's all I have for
25-year
now.
lease. There's a couple of options there, but it's got to be a minimum of a 25-year lease.
Minimum of what?
25-year lease.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have for now.
Mr. Rocco?
So the phase one cost fully loaded would be, you're estimating at 1.25?
That's correct. That's what we're estimating at this point in time, based on very rough numbers. And some of that can be fine-tuned, like we said, based on where you want to be. But we just haven't done the design yet to be able to nail that down.
And can you give us an idea how long this process will take if we decide we want to go forward? Is it a year? Is it longer?
Design, I'm going to defer to Rob, who's the engineer. No, I would suspect that you would see construction starting probably next spring, summer.
The other comments I would make about your question.
You have to use the microphone, Mr. Corcoran. Sorry.
The question I would make about the point I make about your question is you asked about can it be fine-tuned down the construction cost, and the answer is absolutely. It also can be phased as well, too. It may very well be that there's design of a project that incorporates everything in phase one that has been identified in the master plan, as an example. But you may choose to build that out over the course of several approvals and allocations and construction cycles. It wouldn't have to go all at the same time. Carol's reminding me that one of the features, for instance, that's been identified for phase one in the master plan, for instance, the pedestrian bridge. There's also gazebos and trails and parking lots. Well, not all those features might go in at the same time. It could be that in order to get the public out there and able to utilize the area to fish, to walk, to see what's there, some of those features can be put in. The pedestrian bridge, for is an example of a larger dollar item that could go in at a later date if you choose to do that. So it's not only how much money you want to spend, it's how when you want to spend it as well, too.
There was a comment about wetlands, possible wetland issue in the memo I received.
There's some ongoing coordination work with Waste Management owning the property now. There's some ongoing coordination that would lend itself to us to being involved now. Yes.
And so what does that mean?
They've got a mitigation project, tentative mitigation project proposed in the central portion of the island that we would need to work with or redesign to compensate and work with them on their permitting side for some of the things they're going for associated with the Falls landfill within the KIPC. So they've got some ongoing coordination issues that are also being addressed, need to be addressed now. And that's part of the proposals that you've got in front of us. There's two proposals that we gave you. The first one was for coordination and for the grant applications to put this kind of stuff in place and to keep this stuff going and fresh so that wetland issues we're in the middle of, and the township's in the middle of, to protect their interests. And the other is for the Phase 1 design is the other proposal. So they kind of stand separately. They are interweaved to get the whole project going, but I wanted to give you kind of a clear-cut break between the two numbers so you knew what was going where.
Now, those issues are going to affect Phase 1 or the whole plan?
I don't think they will be worked into the plan. Whether they affect Phase 1, I think we can accomplish Phase 1 with the wetlands mitigation areas that they've proposed. I think there are other ways that it may be addressed that might be more advantageous for the township, but I think it can be worked with from what we see.
Just to, I guess, go into a little bit of depth here, we know that, I forget when exactly this came up, but for the large landfill, the Coke Works landfill, for lack of a better name for it, I know that Waste has a name for it, but I don't know what it is right now. A landfill that'll come online, presumably like the next 5 years or so. There are some areas of wetlands that they are going to be working in to build that landfill, and in order to do that, to disturb wetlands, they have to sort of create wetlands somewhere else and protect wetlands somewhere else to sort of balance somewhere in the same rough geographic area. And so that's what's being done now. Waste to sort of make up for disturbing some wetlands in that area is sort of working to create or improve, or if you want to put it, expand some wetland areas in the Biles Island area. And so that's something that's ongoing discussions between ACT and Waste is where exactly is that going to be. I don't know if Waste knows exactly where it's going to be yet, but trying to work with us and doing it in a way that it doesn't sort of get in the way of what we're looking to do. It's something they have to do, and we understand that, and that's fine. It's a law it's a state law they have to do, or federal law possibly they have to do it. And so we're trying to work with them, they're trying to work with us. So that's sort of I guess a slight wrinkle in the plan here. As Mr. Rosina is saying, it's something that can be worked with. So far, your understanding, it's not something where we should just sort of say, well, never mind, let's forget about this island and move to a different island. Right.
The ultimate goal, and I don't have all the slides here from the master plan, the ultimate build-out included wetland mitigation areas within the island. So that's part of the ongoing coordination, was whether those areas can be utilized for that purpose now, whether that can be delayed till later. Those are all negotiations and conversations that need to be happening. Like I said, the delineation of wetlands that's referenced in the permits would be for existing wetlands that are there. Proposed wetlands would be an additional item that we would need to coordinate with Waste as they move forward with their plans.
So we don't know if their plan for these wetlands includes Phase 1 or not?
We've talked to Waste Management and believe that where they're planning the wetlands at this point in time could accommodate Phase 1.
How many acres is the wetlands that they're looking at? 6. Yeah, I think it's important to point out that what Waste is looking at for wetlands mitigation is only about 6 acres. And when we have, after meeting with them, we really don't see any problem with being able to accommodate that on the northern piece. And in fact, in many ways, we think it could actually enhance it because it could provide more opportunities for pedestrian bridges, boardwalks, and things that get you even closer to natural habitat, and it also provides a pretty fantastic educational teaching kind of tool. So there's a real, even though we hadn't really planned on having wetlands mitigation on the Phase 1 piece, I think that it's we view it as not a problem once they decide for sure what they're going to do, and we know that we can accommodate it, and it can be an enhancement.
What is the definition of a wetlands? I mean, what are we talking about?
That's my next question.
By definition, by EPA, a wetland is an area that's inundated 2 weeks out of every year. Enough to alter the soils and the vegetation that's growing there. So a mitigation, what a mitigation area is going to be doing is flooding an area, lowering an area, changing grades so that that area can be inundated. At Biles Island, and one of the reasons it's in the natural inventory for Bucks County and for the state is that you have both tidal and non-tidal wetlands. The ecology between the two is distinctly different. So there's upland wetlands, which are areas that are flowed by natural water from streams and kind of what you're familiar with along stream banks and lakes. And then there's tidal areas that get inundated daily.
Which Phase 1 is tidal, correct?
Phase 1 is tidal. The Delaware and this all the way to Trenton.
So is there any limitation on the Bucks County open space? The total looks like it's 937.
Yeah, one of the options, one of the things, the county, of course, we've had the money. I forget how long we've had it since.
About 3 years.
3 years.
40,000.
There was a bond passed by the county roughly 3 or 4 years ago that awarded open space money to townships, municipalities, not just townships, throughout the county based on their population and size. And we have $940,000 to spend. One of the issues that's been raised, and we've talked about it here periodically, is there aren't a whole lot of areas and falls that are open that are left to buy. Understanding that if you buy a piece of land with open space, it can never be developed. It can be used as passive recreation, basically. But so the idea of let's say purchasing, for example, the old drive-in site further up the highway here, we could do that, but then we could never ever do anything else with it. If ARIA Hospital decides forget about Lower Makefield and they want to build there, they can't.
Not that that site's available.
No, it's not available. It's not anyway because the owner doesn't want to sell it. But the point is that anything you buy, you can never develop. Now you can. We asked Mr. Clark to look into this, and his office to look into it. You can actually use open space money to improve existing township property, so it can be used as for the reasons we're looking at this. And so, absent a lot of areas that we're looking to purchase, and we've talked about different areas over the years, and we've talked to different people about selling different pieces of property just on a very preliminary basis, and either we're getting, prices that are outrageous because they, Falls Township, they got lots of money. Sure, I'm going to, buy this little rinky-dink piece of land for $500,000. No, we're not going to, we're not going to do that. Or negotiations just broke down. That happened recently, another piece of property. So. I think board members are looking now seriously at if we have this money and we have to use it by the end of next year. Is that correct, or is it 14?
I believe it's 14.
14. By the end of 14, we have to use that money. Then certainly this seems like an option that we can pursue. So it's what we're looking at with that money. Now again, we don't have to make any decisions tonight. The idea maybe was to look at this and then. Come back in a couple weeks and have some discussions, but that's something we can think about as a board, is that how we want to use that money?
So if we reduce the scope or the cost of the project to $937,500, could we use all open space money for it?
Say that again?
Yes,
there is a 25% match.
The 25% match. We would have to match up to 25%.
You have to match.
On open space? Or?
On open space dollars, there's a 25% match.
Right. Okay.
And in that, you can use some of the money, and that's what that spreadsheet does. You can use some of the monies from DCNR as the match. You're just not allowed to use county money against county money. So you're not allowed to use natural areas grant money from the county and match it against open space money from the county.
So any open space we buy, we'd have to match 25%.
Have to put 25%.
Regardless if it's there or
Right,
anywhere else.
no matter where it is.
Correct.
Now, the master plan, when you presented that, showed fishing piers and river access, but I don't see that on this here.
There are some birdwatching and fishing piers in this area, I believe. It was identified within the master plan, and it would be a component of this area.
Is that included in the numbers that were shown? Or?
Those numbers can be allocated accordingly based on priority.
Okay.
Guys, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm good. I'm done.
Thank you.
Mr. Galloway, any questions?
So we're talking about a total expenditure of 1.25 million, and of that, we would be on the hook for 250,000 of it.
That's the way that's the potential funding scenario that I've laid out for you. Yes, and that's again to give you estimates of where our money's coming from.
Yeah, I'm just impressed with the way you've reached out to find the funding, the amount of money that could be available to us from the Bucks County natural areas. It's a lot to look at, though. Thank you.
Question I have, am I correct in assuming that looking at phase one and what's going to happen here, I guess mostly focusing on construction, although probably actually engineering as well, that getting access to the site is the trickiest piece of the puzzle and probably the most costly piece of the puzzle? Is that accurate, or is there?
Yes, that is an area that we need to focus our efforts on. Yes.
Right. Because I mean, I drove down there and probably drove on a road I'm not supposed to drive on because I'm not a waste management employee. But you know, you can kind of snake your way back there on a road that's really only wide enough for one vehicle, and then pretty soon you end up on the island.
That's correct, and that roadway would need to be improved because
right,
that's not going to be a public.
It's not, yeah.
You're not going to want a public down that road.
Right. Yeah, and there wasn't anything to my left except wetlands, and I was like, all right, I hope I don't. You know, I better make sure I'm not drifting off the road. Yeah, so obviously, just to get people on, that's going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I'm, you know, and you're talking about certainly, you said the pedestrian bridge and some of the other things on there that don't have to be built. But this, you're looking at sort of the end.
Correct.
You know, this is the entire project, and you're acknowledging the fact that we haven't really done much out there in terms of really looking at what's it going to take to do this, what's it going to take to do that. So we don't know.
Right.
It could be more expensive. It could be less.
Right.
Okay.
A lot of the trail system, we believe, is basically intact at this point in time.
Yeah.
We've done multiple tours out there. A lot of those trails you can navigate. Those are patrolled trails at this point.
Right.
With Waste Management managing the island, they use the top of the berm that way.
Right. I know we saw that in our trip out
Correct.
there. That there are already some trails from their vehicles that go around patrolling the area and doing basic maintenance and things. So we're not sort of hacking a trail through jungle here. Just
correct.
It's, okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Not sure I understand exactly how we're going to deal with the issue of ownership. Given that we don't own the island at this point, do we need to initiate some conversations with Waste Management about starting with a lease? I think you said it needed to be a 25-year lease minimum to be considered that we, in effect, own it. And is that for the open space, use of open space funds?
That's for the use of the open space dollars.
Funding.
So how are we going to approach this?
I'm going to ask Mr. Clark. I know he's been working a little bit on this.
Some of these conversations have already started taking place with Waste Management, and they've indicated a willingness to be cooperative with us to help us achieve our goals with regards to the open space money. There is the possibility of when a portion of it is available to subdivide that property, and we would take ownership of the lower portion of it more quickly than the entire portion, or if there needed to be a long-term lease, Waste has indicated that they'd consider that.
And part of the proposals that you have in front of you are to continue those exact conversations now.
So at this point, the question of ownership should not be a stop for us.
No, because actually the option agreement, or the agreement that we have with Waste Management, the host agreement, lays out quite clearly our option to purchase this property for $1. So, and that's binding. So the issue is just a matter of timing, not whether or not we're going to take ownership, because we are. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Another question I have, in looking at the memo that was sent, I think it was actually well, the front page I'm looking at is from Ms. Besky here. Biles Island 2012 Strategy Development and Implementation. And you have a cost on here of not to exceed $45,000. Okay, you see what I'm referencing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then obviously there's a second page of this, or a second proposal here for really kind of the long-term construction, everything, construction documents, et cetera, for $220,000. The work you're doing now, is that sort of, in terms of going to the county for that funding, for the, I'm trying to think of the name now. I want to say it's not open space funding. It's the natural areas funding. In terms of going for that now, is that something, the $45,000, is that what you're looking at just to sort of continue moving forward with the planning and searching for grants and working with DCNR?
That's to put together the applications for the county funds as well, also continue the planning and to continue working with DCNR. So that's to further all of those endeavors. I've identified in there portions of that I think are applicable to DCNR match. So that's part of your 50% match that you were required to hit for that DCNR money, that you would be required to hit for that money. So I think, I've tried to break that down to stuff that I think is matchable and non-match dollars under the planning grant that's been applied for.
Okay. The reason I'm looking to clarify this, I know in discussions with you, Mrs. Besky, that the original award that we gave you to start doing this kind of project, and you've basically exhausted those funds, and obviously we see the efforts of all that. And I know that we talked about, I've mentioned before that we could certainly have a couple weeks to think about where we go with the bigger scope of this, but is there an interest among board members looking at just the $45,000, not to exceed $45,000 in the meantime, over the next 2 weeks, while they're continuing to work on the one grant they've already applied for? And if we're interested in looking at this other county grant, what's the time issue on that? When does that have to be in?
I've not seen a firm date on that from the county yet.
Okay.
They have a spring and a fall award. I've been led to believe that that's going to be an October date, early October date.
Okay.
So those applications materials would need to be prepped and in place by early October.
And which funding is that?
That's for the natural areas funding.
Natural areas.
The open space funding is a rolling application, so that when they come in, they're reviewed.
Yeah.
Right, and we already have that
Have the
secure.
money, we just have to submit this.
So the natural area is $8,500 is what you're estimating or hoping to get. Is that correct?
For phase one, yes.
For phase one, so.
Is there more you expect for?
That's one of the things we need to figure out with the ownership, and I need to talk more to the county about that.
Okay.
See what we can apply that to.
Okay. All right.
I think what I'm reading here is you're asking for $15,000 for grant funding. We've already secured the open space funding. The DCNR funding, has that been secure to $50,000?
It's been applied for.
It's been applied for.
The award is, the formal announcement's not till third or fourth quarter of this year.
The $8,500 hasn't, we haven't done anything with that yet.
No. And we have, and the monies that are, the open space monies, while they are secured and they're in Falls Township name, there is a submission application process that we need to go through for that. I mean, they need to make sure that the project qualifies.
Okay.
It seems to exceed the cost of the funding to me.
There are multiple funding sources that we're going after, multiple management that we're going with DCNR as well, and also additional funding. So there's other funding out there. There's some PICO money out there that we could seek after. There's some other monies that we would pursue for these dollars.
Mr. Rocco, you were asking whether the money we would actually pay to ACT Engineers is more than we could potentially receive.
Correct,
Grant.
yes.
That's, I mean, just putting it in plain English,
Yes.
that's what you were asking. But your response is that there actually are other grants that you would actually be applying for.
That's correct.
But
And
right-
Beyond the
part of that
$8,500.
$15,000 is to utilize, in order to utilize that $937,000
Right.
for this project. Just the fact that it's in Falls Township name doesn't automatically allocate it for Biles Island. We need to go through a process to get that.
You know, we essentially have to tell them what we're spending it on and explain why we're spending it and give them
Correct.
the out, and we have to sort of
Correct.
defend, I guess.
That all has to be documented in their formats and in there to get that release of that money.
And there have been conversations already to that regard.
That's correct.
County.
So we feel confident that they would,
That's correct.
that they would look
This, like I
positively.
said, this is an area that's included in the Bucks County inventory.
Correct, that's right.
So they are very much in favor of this project. They even wrote a letter of support for the DCNR grant.
The county did.
The county did.
So, Mr. Chairman, what is our decision we need to make now?
Well, my thought is, or my concern is, you know, over the next 2 weeks, you know, I don't know what act, I know obviously their funds have sort of been exhausted. The funds we gave them originally have been exhausted over the next 2 weeks while we're discussing, you know, are they going to be able to do anything to keep moving on it? You know, certainly they could work and just, you know, keep track of how much money they've spent, and then if we end up awarding this, they could just, you know, we could just pay them at that point. But you know, I guess the decision we make as a board at this point in time, is there an interest in looking at the $45,000 and expending that now, or do we want to hold off and have some just discussion and have a chance for people to think about it, maybe contact the ACT engineers or Mr. Rosina at some time in the future in the next 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks actually award what we're going to award and give them direction. That's the decision we need to think about right now. I mean, obviously we don't have to do anything right now, but certainly we can approve part of this and not others, or approve none of it. I'm not interested in approving all of it at this point. It's a lot of.
I think waiting for 2 weeks is fine.
Okay.
I'd like to get some more information on this wetland stuff from Waste Management as well.
Okay.
And how it's going to affect Phase 1.
Okay.
And how much have we spent already on the grant process? Like 12,000 or 14?
That's correct. 12,000.
12,000.
12,500.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Dents.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I feel very positive about the project. I'm still a little confused about the total cost of the project. It sounds like we could tweak it, we could do some things differently, so I'm not sure that the numbers I'm looking at are hard numbers
Right.
necessarily. So that's the kind of conversation I think that we need to have as a board.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, like, you know, I'm not sure we need gazebos down there.
Although in general, I feel, as I think everybody knows, I feel very positive about it and I want to move forward. But I feel comfortable taking some time and
I agree.
thinking it through.
Mr. Galloway?
I share my fellow supervisor's opinions on it.
Okay. All right. So we have a lot of information that ACT has given us, and we're. I guess we'll ask you to return in a couple weeks, if that's okay. We will have a decision for you, and obviously, in terms of contact information, I think all board members have contact information for Mr. Rosina, Ms. Beskey, and Mr. Corkridge. So if you need to get any more information, any more clarification on any of these issues, I would encourage you to do that. I do think we definitely have to make, you know, a solid decision
Yes.
in 2 weeks and give them some real hard directions in terms of where to go. Okay? We're not taking any action at this time, so we will take action in 2 weeks, and so we'll have some public comment at that point. All right? Sound good?
Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 4 is executive session. We don't have a need for an executive session, I don't believe. Item 5 is manager comment. Mr. Gray?
Yes, just 2 items tonight. First item is in regard to the bare root tree offer. Recently, the township received an application for the annual fall 2012 bare root tree offer. The township has done similar bare root tree programs in prior years, planting them throughout the township. Over 270 trees have been purchased through the Tree Vitalize program by the township. An application is required for the program. The Shade Tree Committee is requesting 20 trees at a cost of $50 each for a total cost of $1,000. They're also requesting an additional 10 trees at a cost of $85 each for a total of $850. The deadline for the application is September 14th. The board is asked to consider the purchase of 30 trees as part of the Tree Vitalize program for $1,850.
Okay. 1,350, did you say?
850.
1,000, yeah, I'm sorry, 1,850. Okay, comments or questions for Mr. Gray? Anyone?
Yes.
No?
Mr. Gray, do we have a report on where we hope to be planting the trees?
There are several locations throughout the township, including the community park. There's some locations down on Alden Avenue, and there'll probably be some other locations. We're going to regroup with the Shade Tree Committee and nail down those locations.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the expenditure $1,850 for the Bare Root Tree Program?
So
I'll make that
moved.
motion.
A second.
Motion seconded. Any public comment needed? See no hands. Okay. Mrs. Pullen, sorry.
Mr. Galloway?
Yes.
Mr. Snipes?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Dents?
Yes.
Mr. Rocco?
Yes.
So when you're expending funds, it has to be a roll call vote. It can't just be a voice vote. So, all right, Mr. Gray, anything else?
Yes, just some few announcements from the Park and Rec Department. The Children's Treasure Sales Event will be held on Saturday, September 8th at the Falls Township Community Park, Phase 2 near the boat ramp from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Family Fun Day will be held on Sunday, September 16th at the Falls Township Community Park, Phase 1 Pavilion from 2 p.m. to approximately 4:30 p.m. There will be a magician, Mad Science will be there, and also Otto the Clown. The Fall Recreation Program will be starting at the end of September. You can register for these programs starting on September 13th. If you have any questions regarding Park and Rec matters, call the Park and Rec Department at 215-949-9000, extension 220. That's all I have.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, we're up to board comment. We'll start, who wants to start here? Want to volunteer? Mr. Snipes, want to go first?
Did you volunteer me?
I did.
Yes, thank you. I was glad to hear the proposals tonight, both on the Township Building and on Biles Island. I hope we will be able to make some decisions in 2 weeks from now. Also, on the Bare Root Tree offer, I'm really glad we're working with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. It's a great organization, and both their tree tenders and Plant 1 Million programs are meant to do a lot of reforestation in Pennsylvania, which is crucial. That's not a surprise to anyone that I'm a supporter of trees, I know, but just thought I would say it one more time. So I'm glad we had these. We dealt with these issues tonight. I think they're both positive steps forward for the township. And thank you. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Rocco?
Just one thing. It was a nice ceremony to kick off our meeting tonight, so it's nice to recognize. There must have been, 20-some people there.
Yeah.
So that was nice. Other than that, I'm going to say goodnight. So, good night.
Okay. Mr. Galloway?
No comment tonight, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dents?
I'm going to mention just one thing that I think Mr. Kenny forgot, are all the events going on at Pennsbury Manor this month.
Oh, yeah.
On Sundays down there from 1 to 4, I think they have a gardening. The garden's going to be on display at the end of the month. They have cooking, all kinds of things, right? And that's all I had.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm here for you, don't worry.
I know we've had, and with the wet weather this week, the remnants of the hurricane hitting our area. I don't know if the mosquito issue will get, I'm assuming it'll get a little worse. The spraying by Clark Mosquito, no relation to our solicitor. When they were going through a couple different areas, is that?
Yeah, there's a few more areas that they'll be going through. I believe the county will be going through as well. I believe tomorrow night, Clark Mosquito will be setting traps as well. So they're still in the progress of addressing these mosquitoes.
Okay. All right. And so we are doing what we can. And I think in Mr. Gray, and you're looking through and trying to verify Clark Mosquito's reputation and things like that. I think one of the things you told me that was a little surprising, not a whole lot of municipalities, individual municipalities do mosquito spraying.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we're one of the only, or just, is there anybody
I
else?
believe there's, Tullytown also does it. In the surrounding area, I'm not familiar with other companies that have a private company to come in and do it. I know that they do they do a major airport down in Virginia, they do some other municipalities down there, but in this area, there's not much that they do.
Yeah, I think everyone pretty much relies on the county.
Yes.
All right, and so we are doing what we can. Obviously, the county is still, they can move very quickly. I think we brought up last meeting when we talked to Clark that we're actually restricted. We cannot just go out and start setting traps and start, spraying stuff. You have to be licensed by the state to do that. No one in the township is licensed, none of our employees. And so it actually was just much more efficient to go out and hire a company that can just do it without having to go through any.
Because the county can move quickly doesn't mean they do.
Well, that's true too. Right. You're right about that. And lastly, 2 weeks from today, actually, if all goes according to plan, will be the groundbreaking for the senior center. Long overdue groundbreaking ceremony on the 18th. And I believe the senior center has invited all the board members. I believe you should have gotten invitations, as well as some people here from the administrating. No. Okay, we'll have to make sure. I thought I'll have to talk to Mrs. Murphy down at the senior center. I thought she was sending those out to everybody. But it is on the 18th. I think it's 10 a.m. Is the sort of groundbreaking. And as far as we know, and I know Mr. Sullivan hasn't told me any different, so hopefully no news is good news. As far as we know, everything's still supposed to be moving as it's supposed to be moving?
Yes, the board signed the contract for the funds 2 weeks ago at the last meeting, and we're now waiting for a notice to proceed from the county. The county has asked us for the latest copies of the plans and specs, and we anticipate them to give us the notice to proceed as soon as they get those documents.
Okay. All right. So, hopefully things will move smoothly between now and then. Certainly, like we said before, this is a project that's been delayed probably at least a year, because of difficulties in Washington and Doylestown. So, we're hoping that this can move and can get done, and we can improve that center for the people that go there. So, and with that, I want to thank all the board members and the echo Mr. Rocco's comments this evening, that Fire Marshal DiPolito and his brother, who was the Fire Marshal in Bristol Township, but also Chief of Feral Seals Fire Company, as well as Mr. Reef from the Levittown Feral Seals Rescue Squad for their work in putting together the awards ceremony this evening. It was, it's great to see, just like when we had the little kids who were here back in the spring or after the tragedy in Elderberry. That unfortunately didn't end as well for the gentleman involved, and this did end well, as the gentleman was here this evening. But it's always good to see people pulling together, helping out neighbors, and we start to see that maybe the world isn't as horrible a place as some politicians would have you think. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.